still arriving, people still arriving. It's pretty wonderful to see all these faces on the screen in front of us and the names as well. Thank you all so much for taking some time out of your precious weekend, your Sunday evening, to spend a little time with us to talk about the relationship between joy and mindfulness. And I want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this unique thing. And then we'll have a bit of a soft landing to just really arrive together because, oh, my music's going off again. Let's see if I can get that fixed. There we go. A little technology stuff going on there. But I thought that by the time we do our soft landing, most people should probably be in the space who are coming. And then we'll move into a little panel discussion with our trained mindfulness teachers about what joy means to them, about how mindfulness is related to joy, why they're such good friends. And then there'll be a chance after that for you all to ask questions you might have about mindfulness and joy. And so maybe be keeping one ear open, keeping close to your thinking mind about what kinds of questions you might have for our teachers. It's a really wonderful, unique opportunity to be able to talk to so many different teachers about these subjects. So the Joy of Mindfulness Summit was actually the brilliant idea of Pam Hausner, who you can see on the screen. Maybe Pam will wave. She's probably feeling a little modest though, giving her the credit, but it was a great idea that she had. And I think the rest of us all just thought it was pretty amazing too. You know, considering all of the difficulties that we've been experiencing, the social difficulties, the public health difficulties, violence and a sense of separation, environmental difficulties, all of these things have been weighing heavily on us. And we thought it would be great to be able to help people tap into joy, to really start to practice to be able to find joy in the midst of all these challenges, because it can really help us be more resilient if we have that skill. And we understand that it's always possible to find a place of refuge. It just takes some practice for us to be able to do so. So let's move into a little bit of a soft landing, and then we'll move into an introduction to the teachers. And so just know this is an invitation to really arrive, to kind of let go of all the busyness and processes that may have brought you to this moment, brought you to this Zoom screen. And we can do so by touching into any kind of sensory experience that you may be having in this moment. So it could be just noticing what you see around you, what you see on the screen or in the room around you, and noticing it in a special kind of way. Seeing if you can just kind of notice the data without all the elaborations that our mind likes to do. Just noticing things like colors and shapes and distance, visual texture. And you might want to stay with this sense to find presence, or you might want to experiment with noticing sounds. So that might just be the sound of my voice or ambient sounds in your space. Or it might simply be the sound of silence. And perhaps mindfulness of sounds is where you'd like to stay, or you might move into noticing physical sensations. So the feeling of the seat beneath you or your feet on the floor. The feeling of air on your skin or your clothing draped on your body. And of course, you could also mindfully explore taste or smell. But you might find that one of those senses was most effective for you, was most useful for bringing you, at least for a moment or two, into the now. And then, if possible, I invite you to think of one moment in your life when you're pretty sure you felt joy. So that might be the birth of a child, or some kind of accomplishment that really meant a lot to you. Or it might be a simple joy. For example, if you're like me, you might have noticed a beautiful sunrise this morning. Maybe you feel joy when your favorite sporting team wins a victory. Whatever it is, when you've landed on one, see if you can call up what that feels like to be in joy, even if it's just a little taste of it, a little echo of it. You might notice some sensations in your body, like a sense of expansiveness through the chest, a smile perhaps spreading on your face, a feeling of warmth. There might be some associated emotions here, like happiness or contentment. There might even be some bittersweet there along with your joy. A nostalgia for the past, maybe. And there may also be a number of thoughts, memories, associations, wonderings, questions that come along with this memory. And finally, you may notice also some urges, some things that you feel like you want to do when you think about this moment of joy. And if you were able to touch into at least a little taste of what joy has felt like to you, maybe you can kind of hold that in the back of your mind or tuck that in your heart as you listen to our teachers today about their ideas about what joy is like and how mindfulness can help us with that. And so we'll transition out of this practice maybe by shifting and moving the body a little bit. You might want to hydrate with your water or tea or whatever it is you have beside you. And we'll settle in to meet some teachers. Shane, I wonder if you would mind, if you haven't already, you might already have, turning off the doorbell sound for arrivals.
I
And
would love to if I can figure out how to do it.
oh, if you go to participants
Yes.
and click that extra pop out,
Yes.
and then go to more and click down.
Yes.
It'll say play, join, and leave sound. You can uncheck it.
Got it done.
I guess I
Thank
could
you.
have done that while I was walking you through
Yep.
it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Shane. And you participants, you may wish to put your view on speaker view if you want to see who's talking when they introduce themselves. And I think that if you all don't mind, I'll call on you um, to speak, just so we don't have any air kind of blank space. And maybe I might start with Pam, if Pam would be willing.
Sure.
Thank you. Pam, could you just tell a little bit about yourself and what you do?
So my name is Pam Hausner. I am a mindfulness, a meditation teacher. I work with MAM and I also work independently. I've just completed the mindfulness mentor training with Jack Cornfield and Tara Brock. And I do a lot of my practice around visual journals. I found that visual expression has really enhanced my mindfulness practice as well. It doesn't replace the formal sitting, but it definitely has helped me with more insight.
Thank you, Pam. Daniel, would you mind being next?
Hi, I'm Daniel. I teach classes at the Rime Buddhist Center, and I also teach independently. I go anywhere people ask me to go, so I've taught at some kind of odd places, and that's okay. I teach and I practice not only mindfulness but also metta, or heart-based meditation practices. Those are really where I focus. And in my day job, I'm a union leader, and in that role, my mindfulness practice helps me a lot because I'm constantly brought people's problems, and I have to be okay with that, which is hard sometimes. And so that's it. That's me.
Thank you, Daniel. How about Sydney? Sydney, do you mind being next?
Sure. Thank you, Tracy. And I just wanted to say hello, hello, hello to everybody. Speaking of joy, it's so wonderful to see all of your faces as we come together about joy. I am a MAM teacher and also was one of the co-founders of MAM. And I'm a certified mindful self-compassion teacher as well. And then I also have done a lot of work around mindful movement types of practices, such as yoga and trauma sensitive yoga and others. I won't go through all the names, but others, because that's definitely one of the practices of mindfulness that I really resonate with and brings me joy too. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney. How about Shane? Shane, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. I'm Shane. I live in Lee Summit, Missouri, and I'm a certified mindfulness teacher. I teach with MAM. I went through the teacher training in 2020, and I'm also a certified yoga teacher. I've been teaching yoga for 7 or 8 years now.
Thank you, Shane. How about Amy? Amy, do you feel ready to introduce yourself?
Yes, I was actually writing down what I wanted to say because I was afraid that I would forget as I was introducing myself. Anyway, I'm the founder of Mindfulness in the Heartland. I'm a qualified teacher of mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is an 8-week training in mindfulness that originated out of UMass Medical School. And I'm also what's referred to as a certified practitioner of advanced trauma-sensitive mindfulness. So I bring a trauma-sensitive lens to the work that I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I have Kathann next on my screen. If you're ready, Kathann.
Yes, thanks, Tracy. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathann. I think my passion is around the convergence of mindfulness and needs awareness. And I'm certified to teach both children and adults and do so with MAM and other places. I'm also a facilitator with the Compassion course online and do classes and workshops and things like that. And just love being a part of this community and sharing joy and mindfulness. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathann. Let's see, next I have Nicoya.
Hi, everyone. It is really great to see so many faces at something really fun and lively, but also really important like this. I am coming to you from Kansas City, where I am a third generation resident. And so this truly is my community. And I feel really honored and lucky to be able to serve it and be part of it in the ways that I do. And the main ways that I do that are as a mindfulness instructor, and I am a certified unified mindfulness coach. And then the other way that I serve is as a certified mental health first aid instructor. So those are the two hats I most frequently wear. But as with any community, you may find me in other capacities as well. And I'm delighted to be here as part of the summit and delighted that all of you are here as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicoya. And I have Constance next, if you're ready.
Yes, I'm ready. Hi, I'm Constance, and I teach joy and peace in Wichita. And I used to get kind of hung up on all the other credentials and training. And I found that when I introduced myself and said, I teach joy and peace, people would start out, oh, we need more of that. So then I would just kind of follow it up with, yes, mindful techniques, not even mindful techniques, mindful skills, mindful practices can help you discover your own inner joy and peace. And it's done that for me. So again, I would get caught up in my own kind of, credentials and type of things. But I found that mindfulness and heartfulness, yes, they're so together. And when you get to your heart, magical things happen, and that's where joy is. That's where peace is. That's where I want to be. So I'm delighted. I'm so excited to be with you. I was in Kansas City this afternoon with a lot of you. So, hey, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Constance. And then I think next is Miriam.
Thank you. Miriam Zavagnin. I'm guessing I'm last because of the Z, or maybe that just happened. Okay. I teach mindfulness at Pembroke Hill, a independent pre-K through 12 school. This is my, I'll be going into my 6th year of mindfulness implementation at the school. I've worked in schools for 20 years in lots of different capacities. I'm a yoga teacher and a certified mindfulness instructor through Mindful Schools. And so really where my passion lies right now at the school is really bringing in the yoga inspired movement and then the Mindful Schools curriculum to bring up this new generation where a lot of them, it's interesting when Constance just said that, she says she teaches joy and peace. Whenever I describe, especially to students that don't go to Pembroke Hill, because I do get to teach outside of the school also. And whenever they ask me what I do at the school and I tell them, they say, oh, it sounds like you teach peace. And so that is.
Oops, looks like Miriam froze for a second there. Hopefully we'll get her back soon. Thank you all so much. Oh, Miriam, you just froze for a second, so we just didn't hear the very last part. Did you want to repeat it or? Okay. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. It's so exciting to have this many mindfulness teachers in one place in our area, in our metro area and beyond. And this isn't all the folks that will be guiding you on this journey. There are 5 more teachers that have also provided practices that you'll get to enjoy. And so we just wanted to give you a little bit of a represented sampling and give you a chance to kind of understand where we're coming from for starters, and then have a chance for you to ask any questions. I have 3 questions I'd like to ask our panel. And then after that, we'll open it up to anybody else who might have questions. My first question is, what is mindfulness? Because I think that's a word that we hear thrown around quite a bit, and it means lots of things to different people. And so I was wondering if there was anybody on our panel that would be willing to give their little elevator speech about what mindfulness is. And if you would like to do that, if you could put up either your real hand or your electronic hand, that would be great. Oh, I see Daniel.
So I think mindfulness to me is the ability to be here and now instead of being mentally somewhere else, whether that's in the past or in the future or in my imagination. It's the ability to be here with what's happening.
Thank you, Daniel. That was nice and concise. I wonder if there's anyone else that might want to give their take on it. Amy, I see Amy's hand.
So I really like to, I am basically riffing off of John Kabat-Zinn and Christina Feldman, but the blending of some of their language around mindfulness really resonates for me. And it's really about, mindfulness is really about being intimate with our lives. It's really about developing an intimacy with our lives. And we cultivate that through wise and affectionate present moment awareness. So paying attention wisely and with affection towards what's happening right now.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Any other of our teachers have maybe anything to add, or any little kind of like personal ideas about what it's meant to you, what it's meant in your life? Kathann.
My definition is similar to theirs. So rather than say that, I'll answer your question of what it's meant to me. It's meant that I've realized there's much of my life that goes by without me noticing, or I'm not really paying attention to what it's telling me, the experience. So when I bring my attention to the experience of this moment, both inside and outside my body, all of a sudden there's a lot more life there, and there's a lot more to know. There's a lot more to experience. So it informs me, bringing my awareness to that experience really informs me. It's a deeper self-connection and a deeper connection with others, because I can pay attention to their experience as well.
Thanks, Kathann. We were just talking today, we had a half-day retreat this morning, and we were talking about how when we're mindful, it's like time slows down. And also it's like there are all these little discoveries, even in the most mundane thing, the things that we do every day or we think we know, and then we spend time mindfully exploring, and there's new discoveries every time. And I think, Pam, what did you say about it? You've never gotten tired of it.
The honeymoon is not over.
Yeah, thanks, Pam. I'm wondering if any of the teachers would care to share anything that you feel really grateful about that maybe that you can attribute to mindfulness in your life. Anything that's maybe better or easier, more easeful, or more meaningful now that since you've been practicing mindfulness. Daniel.
Yeah. So once someone asked me, how do you have time to do meditation practice when you have 4 kids? And I said to them, I don't know how people have 4 kids and they don't have this kind of practice. So like, to me, it's of immeasurable benefit as far as having unlimited patience for my kids, because kids take a lot of patience. So that to me is a huge, huge bonus from these kinds of practices.
Oh, Daniel, I can relate to that on another level as well. Like people always say to me, like if it's a holiday, how can you practice on a holiday? There's so much going on. And I always say that's when I really need to practice, because that's when I'm going to be around a lot of people and I'm going to be busy. And it really helps me kind of be a better me if I can get my practice in on those times of the year when you might be tempted not to practice, to let it go by the wayside. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's move to the next one. I think this one's a little trickier. What does joy mean to you? So these words can have so many layers of meaning. To you, what is joy? Anybody want to take a try at that? Oh, Shane.
I'll jump in. I think I said this in our interview that we did together. I used to think joy was like something big, Christmas, birth of a baby, a wedding, whatever. But those are few and far between, a few times during the year. And I've found, like we were saying today, just the mundane stuff today at the retreat, that to me is joy. I mean, one time I was looking down the ground at clover and I saw a bee, a honeybee. And I was like, oh, that's cool. We don't have a lot of honeybees. And then I looked and there's another honeybee and there's another. If I would have just been walking by and just doing my thing, I would not have noticed the honeybees. And just noticing that gave me joy, but also hope. Oh, we're gonna have some more, honeybees. So to me, it's just these small little everyday things that we have so much of that we just kind of take for granted. So for me, that's the joy. It's just, talking to you all is bringing me joy. It's not Christmas, but this is very lovely. So I love it.
Thanks, Shane. Thank you. Pam.
Shane, did you know that when I just learned this today, I saw this picture of a flower in the center of the flower, there were these two bees that were sleeping and they were holding each other's legs while they sleep. And things like that just bring you joy, right? To just see that tenderness, even on a small level in nature. And I mean, joy, we are embodied sacred humanity, and joy is an innate quality for us. And we can just look at nature. We're part of nature. So we look at nature, we see it bursting with life and evolving in new ways to keep going, so filled with hope and joy. That's part of all of us.
Constance.
Okay, so for me, joy is just the ability to be happy no matter what happens. And, life throws a lot of things, we're up and down. I kind of think of joy as that buoy that just keeps us afloat. And happy doesn't always mean jump up and down. And with a mindfulness practice, it's a chance to recommit every day to joy. Because, Shane said, it's just in the everyday things. I don't want to say ordinary, because no day is ordinary. There's something always happening that can bring you joy if you look with the right kind of eyes. So
Thanks, Constance. Yeah, I was thinking about this question. Well, I have been a lot for weeks and weeks now. And I was thinking about how hard it is to describe joy in words, because, it really isn't the thing we're experiencing, right? That may be a trigger, but that trigger could be really different for everybody. What sparks joy for you? For me, it's just this feeling, right? That I can feel it happening in my body. It's like this expansion of my heart center, my chest. I just feel like my whole body feels like more expansive. I feel like a welling up of either, it could be laughter or it could be joyful tears. Sometimes tears come to my eyes when I'm feeling joy, and they're happy tears. And it can be the sound of people harmonizing, singing could just bring that up in me. And it can take me by total surprise. Or seeing, the other day, I looked out in my garden and saw a praying mantis. And I live in the city, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe there's a praying mantis in the city here, right in the urban part of the city. And I just felt so much joy. And I really don't think that I would have noticed that, number one, nor may I have connected with the joy before I was practicing mindfulness. It actually, I was thinking it actually almost feels a little embarrassing how many things can bring me joy these days, because there are things that I would have just walked by or not even noticed before. And now I can connect fairly often around pretty small things. Yeah. Sydney.
I thought I was on mute. Yeah, you know, when you were saying, Tracy, that in your experience, you could just kind of feel that it was very expansive, I really can resonate with that as well, because I'm telling you, in particular, I think my mindfulness practice has definitely deepened my ability to sense and connect with joy. Because for me, it's just this feeling of almost like I'm lost in time, because I'm really savoring. I'm not just looking at something or hearing something or whatever else is sensory that might be turned on for me. It is truly just pausing and savoring it. And savoring really does mean lingering with that particular experience. For me, it's much deeper than just looking at, you know, if I'm walking outside, for example, and I might see some beautiful flowers, or I'm looking at the trees, which is great. But, you know, I will pause oftentimes and just really see and feel those trees. Pam, you were talking about the connection to nature, that we're all part of nature, which I totally concur with too. And so I'm sensing that connection between the trees and the flowers, and really appreciating the colors. Oh my goodness, yes, the colors. I'm such a color-based person, but yeah, I mean, I can just feel that sense within my body in many ways. So that, and then one other thing in particular that just comes to my mind. There's several things, but movement. You know, whether I'm walking outside, it can be just a normal walk, or exercising. Instead of just lifting the weights, like, okay, I'm lifting the weights. Here's my bicep. I'm just lifting it. It's like, can I feel and sense this muscle contracting and not contracting, and the gratefulness for having a body? Because I do want to say, I feel like in American culture, this is my perspective, I think there's so much judgment around bodies, human bodies, and the way bodies are supposed to be and the way they're not supposed to be, and all of that. And this gives us an opportunity, if we're open to it, to really pause and learn to appreciate our bodies and appreciate that connection to nature too. So thanks.
Thank you, Sydney. I think you and I were starting to move into the third question, because it just naturally goes that way, which is, how is mindfulness, why is mindfulness and joy, why are they best friends? And you're mentioning that we're connecting in this much deeper way with our experience than we do when we're not being mindful. And so there are all these other things that come along with that, like a sense of gratitude, like really recognizing how rare some of the things that we're experiencing, even in our mundane everyday life, those things are, and how we can't, none of this is guaranteed, right? We can't take it for granted. We start to learn that, and that makes things so much more precious, in my opinion. I'm wondering about the rest of you, if there are others here, other teachers who have some ideas about how your mindfulness practice is connected with your experience of joy, and how you see those two as being kind of synergistic, or having a relationship of some kind. Amy.
You know what, I'm gonna let Miriam go first, because I've already talked, so.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Can you hear me? Now I'm nervous that I'm gonna freeze again. Thank you. Okay. I was just thinking that whenever, Tracy, when you started off our landing, and you were inviting us to think of, some of the last times that we experienced joy. When you started talking about some of the bigger moments, like a child being born and stuff, I had already kind of gone down a path of thinking of several things that happened today. And they were very small things. And I really attribute that to my mindfulness practice. I don't think probably 15 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of these small things. I would have thought it had to be, Christmas Day with my whole family, or like just like these really big events. And I think it's because of the practice I notice, for me, joy feels like this ease in my body. I just feel very, I don't feel my normal, like without a mindfulness practice, I'm very tense and intense. And so I think that the mindfulness practice is what has allowed me to notice that, oh, my shoulders are relaxed. I'm really appreciating looking at my puppy walking right now. And that feels like joy to me. Because of my mindfulness practice, that I really can tap in and feel how my body feels, feel the emotions that I'm feeling. So yeah, I really think that joy is magnified by having all of these tools to be able to drop into all of these anchors, to be able to see, I'm looking out a window right now, looking at the leaves blowing in the wind. Like that brings me joy, but I wouldn't know that if I didn't stop to actually, pay attention to what's happening around me. It's my long answer.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's such a great point. I'm hearing also in there that you're saying that it's kind of made space for you to be able to connect, in that when we're really tense and stressed out and busy in our minds and bodies, it's hard to slow down enough to connect deeply with some of these things that could provide opportunities for joy.
Yeah, I will also say one other, and this is just for me, from my experience, I do notice greater joy in my life when I'm with people or with myself, and not with device. Now, right now, I'm joyful, and it's I'm looking at a screen with a lot of people, and most of the time, I really feel more joy whenever I'm not with technology.
I bet if we asked for a show of hands, a lot of people would raise their hands about that one. Yeah. And Amy, you had something to share too.
Yeah, thank you. So I think for me, when I think about a lot of what I'm going to say has probably already been touched on, but that joy is really just an undercurrent of life to me. And what mindfulness does is just drop us into the moments, the many, many moments, as we talk about, like when we're not caught up in what we're worried about happening in the future, or dwelling on what has happened in the past that we can't change. When we can drop into this moment, we have the opportunity to tap into that undercurrent, which I would call joy. And to me, it's like mindfulness gives us access to joy, that undercurrent of aliveness, that spiritedness that resides in all of us, that it gives us access to that. And then I also look at it as a valve that we are learning how to open and make more full. There's this energetic quality that comes with joy as well. When you think about, there's uplift that comes with joy, rejoicing, there's this idea of bringing this flow of energy through the body as well when we are joyful, or at least for me, that's what it feels like. And sometimes it can be hard to contain when you're feeling, for me, when I'm feeling really joyful, that idea of like, tears of joy, or just the exuberance of joy. And to me, that's that opening of that valve of joy, really allowing it to widen. And as Sydney pointed to, savor, really allowing it to really course through our bodies so that we integrate those moments when they occur. So I'll stop there.
Amy, I love that imagery of the undercurrent of our lives. And I think we can see that that's true when we think about some of the really challenging circumstances people throughout history have found themselves in, and also are able to tap into joy. Right? That's so I love that idea that we can see it as something that's always there waiting for us. It's just, are we open to it? Are we present for it? Yeah, thank you. Constance.
I think that's great, Amy. I'm just going to play from there, the undercurrent. And I think it's anytime that you release yourself to the flow of life, because you find that when you get into joy, that there's really not too much you need to do. It's because joy is a state of being, and it's something that you can tap into, that you can bring to every single day. And I think that a lot of people think, oh, joy is so elusive. It's so out there. It's not for me. I have to work. I have to push. I have to strive. But it's really in that undercurrent, in that release, the flow, that I think joy is, so present. So that's what mindfulness does for me, and joy.
Yeah, and I definitely want to put out there that, joy wasn't a word that was used in my family or my peer group. And so it really has only been in recent years that word has come into my vocabulary outside of Christmas cards. And so I think that if you're not finding that in your life, you're tapping into joy very often, I would say I think that's fairly mainstream in American culture, that isn't emphasized, that there's kind of a more in some ways like a superficial kind of happiness that's emphasized, and not so much this undercurrent of joy that we can tap into. If you have a strong faith tradition, maybe you have had more instruction and guidance around joy, but for many of us, it's kind of a new thing. And the good news is, I think that with practice, mindfulness can help us come to have a felt sense of what joy really feels like. I'm aware that there may be a teacher or two that hasn't had a chance to share, and there's no pressure to, but I would love to make space for anybody who would like to share and hasn't had a chance to, or who has something kind of on the tip of your tongue that you'd like to share about joy, mindfulness, personal experience. Nicoya.
Yeah, just the overwhelming theme. Pam said something that really sort of triggered it, and then I kept hearing it over and over in what everyone was describing about this connection between mindfulness and joy. And it is that word connection. Pam said, we are embodied sacred humans, and as humans, we're hardwired for connection. We're hardwired to be connected through our senses, emotionally, psychologically, socially, spiritually. And that's, I think, the magic in my experience of mindfulness, is that it is this wildly effective tool for tapping into a sense of connection. And I think every joyful experience that I heard mentioned so far has been about that, just a fundamental deep connection. So that's what I wanted to offer.
Well, thanks for that, Nicoya. Yeah, it reminds me of a quote that's something like, joy shared is joy doubled, something like that. And it's so true. It's another amazing aspect of joy. It may be maybe it's the ground from which joy springs, but also it's this quality of we want to share it, and we can get vicarious joy from other people's joy. Like if we see somebody else having a joyful experience, we get a little dose of that many times. And so not only can we learn to, I think, cultivate our joy in our own personal experiences, but we can also learn to get really good at sharing the joy that other people are experiencing. And that really feeds into that quote, that then not only are there the joyful experiences that you're having in the moment, but now you can also share in, the 7 billion people on the planet, their moments of joy as well. So joy is a pretty unique emotion. It's a pretty unique way of state of being. And I think that makes it more durable and enduring than some of the other emotions that tend to come and go. And that we can hold joy along with difficult emotions like grief and pain and hardship. There can still be joy there, even in the midst of that. Whereas I think some of the more, maybe the more contingent emotions like happiness tends to really dip when we have circumstances that aren't very happiness inducing. Yeah. Sydney.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention when you said, Tracy, that joy in connection with difficult emotions. I personally experienced some difficult emotions and some losses here recently, some multiple losses. And I definitely experienced that where I was actually mindfully holding a lot of difficult feelings, emotions for quite a while, which I think would be normal, of course, with loss. But I also started to notice some shifting around that because I started to be more aware of my feelings of compassion and my sadness, as well as the gratitude in relationship to my loss, the gratitude and the deep appreciation for having that experience. And I noticed that it started to kind of move into this sense of, it was like it was really true, deep love of even letting go in that letting go process. And then therefore, as I became in this sense of more peace, this sensing of more peace for myself, and then sensing more peace for whom I'd lost, then it just morphed into just truly this expression of love, which is another part that I think is so connected to joy. But then the sense of peace of like, that's okay. There's joy now. There's joy with this peace. There's joy within my love. There's even some deep, deep, deep peace, joy within the process for me. I'm saying that was my experience. So that's a real experience that I just had not too recently, that I kind of witnessed mindfully and observed myself in my process. Tracy, can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you. Unmute. I was kind of having images of like almost like a sailboat or like a submarine where you let off some ballast and then there's some buoyancy and there can be some real joy in that. Almost the kind of a wind in your sails that carries you through those rough times. And that's a perfect example, I think, of what Amy was talking about with that undercurrent of joy that's available if we know where to look and how to look. Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. And Pam.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Sydney. I mean, that's why we're having this summit, because there's just been so much that we are called to hold right now. And it's so important that we are reminded to practice joy. It's actually one of the 4 traditional meditation practices. It's one of those 4. It's called the Brahma Viharas. And the first one is loving kindness. The second one is compassion. And we all do loving kindness and compassion practices, right? And then the 4th is equanimity, right? We totally get that. But the 3rd one is joy. It's part of the tradition of mindfulness. So I am so grateful that we have this opportunity to really focus on it, and so excited about all the different meditation practices that we are invited into this week.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, this isn't, we're not inventing anything new, are we? No, this is things that wise people have known throughout the ages, and it's like we have to rediscover them with each generation. Yeah. Yeah. So if there aren't any other musings from the teachers, experiences from the teachers, I thought maybe we'd start to open up to other folks. If there might be anything, any questions you might have or things that you'd like to share, maybe some of what we shared has sparked some ideas for you about, maybe you already have a relationship with mindfulness and joy, and you might want to share a little of that, or you have something that you'd like to ask teachers to clarify about what they've said. And just feel free to raise your hand. You can also put it in the chat, and at some point I'll read some of those out from the chat for our teachers. So I see one in the chat here. I'll read that out. It says, are there any risks specific to joy practices? I'll take a tricky question right up off the bat. Thank you for that, Toby. I can speak to it if nobody else has anything right now. Sometimes when we do practices around qualities that we might think of as beneficial or pleasant qualities, sometimes we can get a little bit of kind of almost an opposite thing can happen, where we feel, instead of joy coming up, we can feel a lot of regret or pain. Sometimes we might bring up the thought of maybe the birth of a child, and that also then brings along feelings about your child growing up and no longer being a little baby anymore, and there can be some feelings of loss around that. And so definitely, I think none of these practices, even the ones with the really fun sounding names, I don't think any of them are without risk, that there can be some discomfort that can come up with any practice. And so it's good. I'm so glad Toby asked, because it's good for us to be prepared and to know that the mind can go all kinds of different places with anything. And so it is possible, but that painful things can come up. And, I think there's a lot of ways that we can work with that. We can kind of titrate the practices. So maybe just a little at a time, going in and out of the practices, kind of giving yourself some rest and compassion. And then when you're feeling ready and more resourced, you can go back into the practices. You can kind of come up with anchors that help you feel more present, or that can pretty reliably help you feel calm or grounded or safe. So that might be calling to mind a being, a pet, or a beloved person that's really cares about you a lot and that you feel safe with. You can bring up that person, or a place in nature that feels very nourishing for you. You can bring up an image of that and help your body to calm down and help your thoughts to settle before then launching back into the practices. And there are a lot of, I think, great techniques to help with challenges, which is why it's really nice to have a teacher. If you don't have a teacher, it's really nice to have one, because inevitably we run into frustrations, challenges, difficulties, or just questions. And so doing these things on our own can be a little lonely and frustrating. And I think sometimes people stop practicing mindfulness because of that. They get frustrated. They don't know where to turn, and they just say, well, this isn't for me. And maybe sometimes it isn't for you, but sometimes maybe we prematurely feel that way because we just aren't sure how to deal with the stuff that's coming up for us. But yeah, for sure, some difficult things can come up around any of the practices, and joy practices are the same. Yeah. Anybody, any of the other teachers want to say a little bit about that? Daniel.
Hey, I just wanted to add, not only, yes, having a teacher helps a lot with avoiding any kinds of problems that could come up, but also just having a community as well. Sometimes just having a teacher is not enough, but having rather more people that you interact with that have the same goals you do really, really helps in this way as well. And that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It can be so nice to hear the challenges and remedies, I guess, that other people are experiencing, and it can be really useful for your own practice. Yeah, and feeling that support as well. Thank you. Yeah, and I think Nicoya had something as well.
Yeah, to sort of an additional facet that can accompany what you and Daniel described, and I think also speaks to a comment in the chat about how to practice with the different practices this week. And that is, sometimes I think, I know I have fallen into a trap, and I've seen others fall into of unrealistic expectations of what these mindfulness practices are supposed to result in. And remembering, first of all, it's a long-term game. It's not, it's like you don't go to the gym one time and expect to climb Mount Everest 12 months later. Like, it just, there needs to be a correlation. But also, doing a whole bunch of any kind of particular practice, whatever the quality is aimed to be cultivated, it's not like we're shoving everything else aside and that stuff's never gonna, it just doesn't exist anymore, and all that's left is this one quality that we're trying to cultivate. It's more like, I always think of like grooves, and we have a lot of grooves that may go one way, and when we're doing these practices, we're just cultivating some new grooves that maybe aren't as easy to fall into. And I think the other piece I'm pointing to there was really exemplified by Sydney's wonderfully shared experience about holding a complete picture, so that it's like a complete experience. So these joy practices help us tap into the joy that can be there in the midst of a complete palette of experiences. So it's not about repressing or getting rid of the icky stuff. It's about allowing the good stuff to enter the picture as well. So that's what I wanted to offer in addition, as a kind of part and parcel with what you and Daniel also explained, and what Sydney gave a very concrete example of.
Thank you, Nicoya. Very well said. Yeah. And we really can't make joy happen. We really just can't. It just arises, right? And that we just maybe are in the right place at the right time with the right mindset, and it all comes into play. But there's also, we're complicated beings, right? There's a lot of other stuff going on inside us and in our lives besides this one quality. So maybe we're pointing to, just really holding lightly the idea that you're going to feel joy. And then I like to tell the story of my yoga practice. I love yoga. I practice it almost every day. And I cannot put my leg behind my head. And the way I think about it is, should it become available to me, I will be open to it. But if I tried to make my leg go behind my head, I would probably injure myself, and I would be frustrated, and I would never want to practice yoga again, or maybe I couldn't if I hurt myself enough. And so it's just kind of being open to the possibility rather than trying to force an outcome. Yeah. Yeah. There's another question here, I think that's really great. Would you talk a little bit about what the meditations this week will entail and some suggestions for practicing with them? Great question, Kathy. I don't know if you all, I'm probably maybe Pam and I and Shane are more in the know of what they all are. You all probably just mostly know what your own practices are. So I am glad to start with a little bit, and then maybe Pam and Shane, if you want to add your 2 cents, that would be great. But we have a very wide variety, which is a lovely thing about this whole program, this summit. And they are for adults and children. Some of them are stillness, some are in movement, some are creative practices, some are explorations of the senses. And you're going to get more meditations than you can do in a week. So you'll get an email every morning with some instructions, some guidelines, some suggestions, and the links to your meditations. And I would just suggest maybe picking one that jumps out to you in name or in description. And then the teachers have very kindly offered some explanation, and their meditations do include some guidance around what to expect and how to navigate challenges, some challenges that you might run into. But I would suggest listening to their interview. There's an interview video where they talk about their practice and what their intention behind their practice is. So I'd suggest listening to that first and then trying the practice. And they're so varied that it's hard for me to say how you should do, how you should approach them. But maybe it's good just to kind of listen to your gut, listen to your intuition, and just to approach it like it's an experiment. Like you have this little buffet and you're looking at what looks tasty and you're going to give that a try. And maybe it's not for you. That's okay, because tomorrow there'll be more different things on the buffet. And then you'll have all of these for 30 days so that you can, you don't have to get them all in a week. You can try some of the other ones later. And the hope is that, since there's such a variety, there'll be at least maybe one that'll feel useful or that will resonate for you. And then we're always here. You can email us and let us know if you're having any challenges or if you have any questions, and we're glad to respond to you about that. But yeah, you're just very fortunate to get a very incredible buffet of lots of different practices. Yeah. What other questions do you have about this experience, about mindfulness, about cultivating joy? Anything that you ever just wished you could ask a mindfulness teacher now that you have 11 of them here on the screen? Or any of your own experiences that you'd be willing to share around your practice of mindfulness or your experience of joy? I think I saw a hand. I hope I say your name right, Shubham?
Yes, Shubham.
Shubham. Thanks for contributing.
Yeah, thank you. So, namaste. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Clearly?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So, thank you. I am Shubham Joshi from India. She's a sample. I would like to share my own experiences. I'm a yoga teacher, meditation, and kind of spiritual teachings. What I feel, what is the best in joy, because joy is given to us from the birth by the universe. It's a gift, it's a present to us by the universe. What comes like it's eternal, it's always there. But as a human being, what is the difficulty with a human being in the to experience the joy is sometimes our mind likes to play tricks with us. Like suppose I'm very happy. You were talking about the buffet. So suppose I have a great lunch with my partner or with anyone. But suppose it started raining outside. So my joy is gone. So I think not putting so much emphasis on outside reality, like it can be rain, it can be anything. Suppose in our life, the outside circumstances can change our business, our work, relationship, but the joy comes from the within. It's like our connection with ourselves, and this is what I learned from the mistakes. From I spent my time with the sages, with the monks. So what I learned, even with my own practices, for the realization and the technique which can help every one of us is, and yes, there are wonderful teachers here. I love to listen all of them today. Is I think what I can add from my side is observation technique. Observation technique always works. Like we observe ourselves, we observe our mind, like what is the nature of the mind. When we know this is the nature of mind, because it's a journey of, this the entire life is a journey of learning. We learn till the last breath. We learn about ourselves, because possible today we like the rain, tomorrow we don't like the rain. So it's all about the nature of our mind. So once we know ourselves well enough that yes, this is my mind and this is the nature of my mind, I think then we can keep the joy in every single moment. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Yes, I love that you're pointing. First of all, I love that you mentioned that it's a gift. What a lovely way to think of joy. And then also I love that you pointed out that our minds can be very tricky and that we can have some habits that we're not aware of. We're not even aware that we're influencing our own experience. And so mindfulness can be so useful in helping us see that inner trickster. You're like, oh, there you are doing that thing again. And then we can have some choices around that, right? We can decide if we want to be in alignment with the inner trickster, if we might have some more investigation we might want to do. So in a way that the practice helps us kind of strip away some of that stuff that may be obscuring the gift that's already there waiting for us to open it up and experience it. Yeah, thank you, Shubham. I see something in the chat here. It says from Pam, I wonder what you do when there are very difficult times in your life and how you've seen your mindfulness practice help you, or maybe could you see that when you weren't practicing, it hindered you? That's
Can I add to that really quickly?
Yeah.
I have a similar question. Hi, I'm Jonathan, everyone. In a similar vein, I think it's fascinating that Brene Brown, who's famous for talking about vulnerability and shame, actually started as a joy researcher. She was only interested in researching joy, but then she realized she couldn't research joy without talking about vulnerability, shame, and sadness, because that's how people access joy. And so my question is, how, because people are talking about joy as this enduring state of being, what are the obstacles to mindfulness helping you access joy? What do you do when you're in a period of grief? What does joy look like? How does that show up? Yeah, so the relationship between joy and grief, obstacles to mindfulness and joy, how do you deal with that?
Amy.
So I think the best way for me to talk about this is from a personal place, and hopefully it will be informative in terms of what I share. So when I began practicing mindfulness, I was in my early 20s, and I had come through some pretty heavy trauma as a child. I was dealing with a lot of complex trauma is what it's referred to as. So some of the things that we've already touched on, having a teacher who has some understanding of trauma or has a sense of what it might be like for someone who's learning mindfulness, who may have a heavy load. I think for so many of us in our contemporary culture, what we learn how to do is really clamp down around our trauma, our sadness, our shame, our grief. We hold it and contain it. And that was my experience for the first 20 years of my life, was just holding and containing my experiences And I refer to that as like a white knuckle approach. And to me, it's much like containing your energy in a pressure cooker, that there's just a lot of built up energy that you're constantly holding on to. And so when we begin this exploration of present moment awareness, especially if we're in the midst of difficulty, or there's difficulty that we've suppressed or pushed away, by bringing awareness to it, we can actually, start to feel some real discomfort. It can become really uncomfortable, and perhaps too much. And as Tracy mentioned, it might be the reason why so many people walk away from the cushion, is because they're overwhelmed by the experience of feeling into what's already been there, but what they've been holding on to so tightly. So for me and my practice over the years that I've been practicing, it's like that releasing of the valve. It's learning that idea of titration between, feeling into the discomfort and then making space, and that can be when we start to release that energy that's been kind of pent up or held, that joy can then flow through. It's almost like we've put something on top of it. And if we don't deal with what's on top of it, we can't get to it as easily. But we do have to be gentle, kind, and friendly to ourselves as we go through those processes, especially if we have, heavy loads of grief or sadness or trauma that we're working our way through. We have to learn how to dip the toe, feel into the experience, and then give ourselves space to recover from that. Kindness and friendliness is at the forefront of mindfulness practices. And so we really need to take that gentility, that affectionate tone and quality into these practices, so that in a way we're kind of unwinding what we may have been holding on to. And that, at least that has been my experience, is that we shouldn't jump into the deep end of the pool if we don't know how to swim. We have to learn how to swim, and then we can go deeper into the pool. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amy. And I love how you talked about the holding on, that there's like a holding on that's been happening. And there can, I think, also be a real pushing away, like a real fight going on. And we often, I think, at least in mainstream American culture, we can often be just so cruel to ourselves, so cruel in our judgments of ourselves. And so the way that we respond to these challenges and difficulties is we beat ourselves up about it, right? And if we're beating ourselves up and then we feel like the world's beating us up, how are we going to have space for meetings? I mean, all we can do is really put up shields and try our best to try to keep all this stuff away. And so I love what Amy was saying about, part of learning mindfulness is learning how to be mindful, not just that you're mindful. I always say it's not bringing how you hear about little kids burning insects with a magnifying glass. We're not taking a magnifying glass and burning ourselves with this intense glare. We're coming in with a curiosity, a gentleness, a genuine interest in our own experience. And I think Shubham was saying how we get to know ourselves then, we get to know our minds. And if we haven't had a relationship with our own minds, that can be a very scary place to go, without any guidance. It's like a jungle in there. And so what part I think of what Brene Brown is so wisely teaching is she's warning us there's some shame in there, there's vulnerability, and we may not like it when we start to touch into it, but we can learn ways to help ourselves with that, to fortify ourselves, resource ourselves. We can learn strategies for moving in and out of these experiences so that we gain more confidence, that our healthy coping skills become more automatic. Yeah. Wonderful questions here. Gosh, we didn't get any easy questions today, did we? I'll also answer the part that says, can you see, maybe you all want to chime in too, but what's it like when you haven't been practicing? Do you notice a difference? Yeah, Amy.
It's messy. That's how I would say it. It's messy. I mean, life is messy, but then I get messy when I'm not practicing. Life is always going to be messy, but I definitely, especially early when I first started practicing, I would have gaps, in my practice where I'd, be diligent for periods of time and then I wouldn't be diligent. And it was the experience of not being diligent that would bring me back to my practice. So even if we have times when we sway away from taking care of our daily practice, it may just be what brings you back. I think a lot of times guilt and shame kind of keep us from getting our butts back on the cushion. But for myself, what made me after 10 years of commitment or, a back and forth commitment to meditation, to just really committing to, yes, I am a meditation practitioner and this is, what I do. This is part of my life. The first 10 years of my life or practice was not that. It was the back and forth, but it was recognizing when I wasn't in my practice, how much messier life felt that actually got me back on the cushion. So I think we need to, continually bring that idea of the beginner's mind, like we just bring ourselves back. We just come back and sit and let go of any guilt or shame that may be there if we haven't been consistent with our practice, because hopefully you've seen the difference between practicing and not practicing. And you love yourself enough to get your butt back on the cushion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe for some of us, we love the other people in our lives enough to get our butts back on the cushion. Yeah, so well said. Yeah, I think Daniel raised. Yeah.
Hey, I just wanted to add, I have found that when I skip my practice or whatever, I start to become really easy to manipulate. And by that, I mean, I can see a commercial for a food on TV and I legit want to get that food and I will get it. Or I will see targeted ads on the internet that's really dangerous for me if I'm not being mindful, because I'm going to buy all sorts of things because they're targeted right at me and I will just fall right into that trap. So for me, that is what missing my mindfulness practice means. It means I'm going to give into whatever temptations are around and I'm just going to be helpless to be manipulated.
Yeah, maybe that kind of goes back to what Shubham said too, is that if we know our minds, if we're watching our minds and we know our minds, we see when that starts to happen. I was chuckling because I've had a participant told me that they stopped smoking, there was no talk of stopping smoking, but when they became mindful of smoking, they didn't really want to smoke anymore because they saw it, for what it really was doing to them. And then another person told me that they would sit down at night with a big family-sized thing of Doritos and that their mindfulness practice really helped them to not plow through that bag in a way that they used to. So these are really like practical examples of how, if you're, not beating yourself up, but you're just kind of curious, like, wow, am I still enjoying these Doritos after the 93rd Dorito? Is this still a pleasant experience for me? That naturally, without any shame or blame, we may put the Doritos down and save them for the next night. Kathy Ann.
I just wanted to say a bit about, that's partly what Jonathan brought up. If I'm not being mindful when life is tough, then I'm not noticing when it's becoming overwhelming. I'm not noticing when I'm outside my comfort zone or outside my challenge zone, and now it's just unbearable and overwhelming. So that's what happens to me when tough things are happening or trauma is triggering. If I'm not mindful, I'm not able to care for myself as well. And if I am mindful, I can notice, wow, this is just too hard right now. So how about I step back And maybe in those moments, because I'm paying attention to this big unmet need over here and it's overwhelming, I can say, okay, maybe as part of that stepping back, could I just pick one thing in my life right now, one need that is met for me, and just bring my attention to that for a few minutes and be with that and sort of fill my cup up again. You know, it's a way of offering myself some compassion and empathy, filling that cup so that then I could have some resource to once again address that other unmet need and see if with a little more resource, I can be with it and I can experience it and maybe explore it. And so mindfulness is a tremendous help for me when life is hard, because it helps me really raise my awareness about what I can or cannot do in this moment, or what is helpful and what is not helpful in this moment. And I can make different choices based on that awareness. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, so well said, Kathy Ann, that, you know, how will we even know what we might need if we're not mindful of our own inner experience? Yeah. And it's amazing to see how much more effective we can be at meeting our needs when we notice it before it's become an extreme, urgent situation. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, thank you. I was, because I came into mindfulness a little later in life, I have experienced loss before mindfulness and after mindfulness. And I can say, I don't know if I can describe it eloquently in words, but it's a very different experience. Not that it's not painful, it doesn't take the pain away, but it's much more of an unadorned experience. It's just what it is, instead of being all the other things that we can bring to our losses, you know, all the other experiences of loss that we can kind of now tie to this next loss, all the other misfortunes in our lives that we can now sort of pile on and make a part of this different loss, all the speculations about what this loss might mean about you, what it might mean for you. And instead it can just be loss. And that's still painful, but it's a different, it's a much more manageable kind of pain than pain that we pile all kinds of extra elaborations on top of. I saw Sydney and then Constance.
You know, I think in my experience of mindfulness practices, that one of the things I became more mindful of, actually, I think it happened a bit before I started practicing, but I think it just deepened it over time, was the impact for me of a lot of what I had absorbed and had experienced in American culture. And actually my mindfulness practice helped me deepen that, that awareness. I had it, especially because of my identities as a cisgendered woman of color. Yeah, I've had it all along about those factors, but my mindfulness practice did help me, that kind of self-observing part of it, that witnessing part of it, to deepen how some of the values, I'm not saying all of them, but some of the values within American culture, in my experience, had been very, very harmful, and how it kind of amplified a lot of my difficult feelings. So for example, this sense of, we've got to be perfect. You don't make mistakes. You don't make mistakes now. You just don't do it. And if you make a mistake, you need to beat yourself up. Something's wrong with you. There's the imposter syndrome, or there's just something. There's something about, you know, me personally. And also the piece around impermanence, that the reality is that nothing is permanent, nothing. But I feel like in my experience of American culture, there's always still to this day, these messages that are sent out that, you know, you need to continuously hold on to things, places, people, myself, everything. You must cling, you must hold on. You cannot let go. You can't let go of anything. So those are just two examples of just what I wanted to share around, a lot of what I experienced. And then I noticed my mindfulness practice, once I started kind of absorbing, especially that perfectionistic piece and that not holding for me, the law of impermanence, because it's reality instead of being in this delusional state. Once I started moving more into that, then I felt like there was a shift. There was a shift in me in many ways when it came to holding difficult experiences, feelings, thoughts, pain in my body, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Thank you, Sydney. Like this beautiful dance and balance of things that you realized that you maybe wanted to let go of, that were placed upon you, that we have placed upon us, that we now recognize and we can let go of, and other things that maybe there has to be acceptance around, because it's the law of the universe and there's some acceptance. Yeah. And mindfulness can really help with both of those things. Yeah. Thanks, Sydney. Maybe Constance, maybe you'll have the last word because we're coming to the end here. Woo, no pressure.
Okay, well, back to Jonathan's question. And for me, mindfulness really, it was the realization that joy and sorrow are both so very interconnected, and they're from the very depth of our heart, of our being. For joy, the birth of my first child, my son, was wow. I've never experienced that emotion. And I can remember distinctly holding him at 5 a.m. after everybody went home, and it was just the two of us. And I promised him, I will take care of you the rest of your life. And in 2020, in the midst of our mindfulness teacher training, he took his life. And, I was there, but I won't go into that, but it was, thank you. And if I wouldn't have had a mindfulness practice, I can't tell you how that really just, kept it, I don't want to say together, because I was just like present with whatever came up, whatever. And that was like on one side, the people who would reach out and say, oh, purgatory, and they'd talk about the Catholic upbringing. And then my mindfulness teacher friends would say, you still have a relationship. And that is true. That is true. And somebody sent me a poem from Rumi, and I don't remember the whole poem, but the main line was, I tasted grief and it was sweet. And to me, if you can, open your heart to the grief, the sorrow, the joy, and, just be present, be totally present. So that mindfulness has, it's saved my life in many ways, but, right there.
Thank you so much for sharing that story, Constance. And, it reminds me of, we did a little community exercise called 5 Mindful Words, where we made word poems about mindfulness. And one was my anchor in the storm. And that's what it reminds me of, what you just said, that mindfulness was your anchor in the storm.
It's true.
Yeah. Well, I once again just want to extend so much gratitude and appreciation for everybody who came today. We've recorded this meeting, so we'll send it out to you to review if you like, and to the 100 other people that weren't here today that might like to watch it. And you'll be getting your first gift Monday morning, bright and early. So we'd love to hear feedback from you. If there are things if you're having any challenges, or if you want to send us any support, we'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, wishing you many opportunities for joy over the coming week, and happy practicing to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Bye.